Here.
McCormick, Conwell, Hairston,
Here.
Bashir Jones, Santana, Zone,
Present.
Cleveland, Slife,
Present.
Bishop, Johnson,
Here.
Joe Jones.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for calling the roll. This Health and Human Services Committee and Transportation Committee, this joint committee, is being held during the COVID-19 emergency declaration in accordance with Ohio's open meeting laws, as amended by sub HB 195. This meeting is being held using the Zoom platform and is being live streamed on YouTube and on Cleveland's Channel 20. It can also be seen on the Cleveland City Council website and from Council's Facebook page. In accordance with the Ohio Open Meetings Regulations, as amended by Sub House Bill 197, notice of this committee hearing was publicly posted. The committee hearing will be conducted as all hearings in accordance with the council rules and Robert's Rules of Order. The chair will facilitate the meeting and call on persons to speak. If you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand option on Zoom. Please limit your comments to the matters before today's committee. As is the usual practice, any actions to be voted on during the committee will be done by voice vote, called and recorded by the committee clerk. The following meetings held during the COVID-19 emergency declaration will be conducted as virtual meetings in accordance with Ohio's open meeting laws as amended by HB 197. The public may observe these meetings on YouTube and on the Cleveland City Council channel and on Cleveland City Council's website page. Today we have with us a presentation that will be given to us by our own Ann Tilley and Callie Mersman, as well as I believe we are also joined by Director Freddie Collier, as well as Chief Darnell Brown. Before I go to our presenters, I'd like to ask my colleague, Councilman Matt Zone, who has been leading the Vision Zero effort to give an overview of what we're about to do. And then I'll be turning over the meeting to my colleague, Councilwoman Phyllis Cleveland, the Chair of Transportation. Councilman Zone, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Griffin and Chairwoman Cleveland, for convening this joint hearing. We've made a lot of progress, and the working group wanted to just update as many members of councils in real time where we're at this point. I do want to acknowledge and recognize, and after I make some opening remarks, ask Darnell Brown, our Chief Operating Officer for the city, to make some opening remarks as well. Darnell and myself are co-chair of the task force. This really kind of incubated in the fall of 2017, which led to council passing a resolution on January, I believe it was January 5th of 2018, where we formalized and created the Vision Zero task force. And as part of that effort, we wanted to get very involved with looking at all aspects of how we can create safer mobility for all road users on our city streets, but also recognizing that it just can't be the city of Cleveland alone. And the beauty about this coalition is we have 9 different governmental and quasi-governmental entities that are part of our initiative working to improve the safety conditions of our roads. In August of 2019, we, after spending nearly more than a year and a half as a working group, we brought in the consultant, the national director of the Vision Zero Network, Leah Sham, who went through and did a symposium with us, helping us really think about, as we move towards issuing an RFP, to hire a consultant to help us create our roadmap going from vision to action. I do want to acknowledge and recognize our colleagues who have been actively involved in various capacities since the Vision Zero initiative was created. Council President Kevin Kelly has been very involved. Councilwoman Cleveland, as well as Councilman Griffin. I want to thank both of you for attending the symposium and being involved at various points of this planning exercise, as well as Councilman McCormick, who is very involved and has been participating on our regular meetings. So really excited to hear our colleagues this morning. And with that, I would like to recognize Chief Darnell Brown for any opening remarks.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of City Council, to my friend and co-chair, Councilman Zone. As he elicited, we've been at this for quite a while, but we didn't invent Vision Zero. It started a number of ways, a number of years ago, I believe in Norway, but it is an international initiative, and the goal, simply stated, is to eliminate fatalities. That's why, hence the word Vision Zero, due to and we'll get into this as we get into the presentation, crashes, and we don't use the word accidents as we talk about the Vision Zero initiative, because crashes are preventable. And we're going to talk a lot about why that's an important part of what we do. I'm privileged to lead a collaboration of folks from the city administration, from all the various departments that it really does take to help facilitate this. So between, as the councilman said, our city resources and our other governmental partners and our community stakeholders and our members from the community, we got a very large collaborative of people trying to do some very good work. And as we're kind of turning the corner to get to a point where now we're actually we're engaged in hiring a consultant to facilitate really finalizing the Vision Zero strategy for Cleveland. We want to make sure that we take everyone along with us. The councilman probably already also made us all aware that there are a lot of other cities that have been doing this for a while and do it well. So if you look at, Boston, Chicago, New York, Austin, LA, all over the country, Pittsburgh, there are Vision Zero initiatives in place. This has to do more with, the whole strategy for equitable mobility for all. And then really, I'll give you one last kind of stat. And if you look at, as an example, we learned city of San Francisco, 12% of their locations make up 70% of their accidents. And through looking at our data, you're going to see here today, we have a very similar circumstance here in the city of Cleveland. So there are many factors that contribute to safe mobility, including roadway design, speed, enforcement, behaviors, technology, policies. We're going to talk about all that today. So thank you, Councilman, for providing me an opportunity just to share some of our perspective as we look at, how to move forward with this very worthwhile initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Brown. This would not be possible without your stellar shepherding and leadership on this matter. Last comment, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ann Tilley and Kelly Mersman, is in my opening remarks, I mentioned that it's much more than the city of Cleveland. As everyone on this call knows, air pollution or crime doesn't stop at a municipal border or a ward boundary. And so having good coordination with the appropriate partners is key for making shift changes. In addition to the city of Cleveland, Cuyahoga County is a part of our task force and actively involved. ODOT District 12, so the state is very engaged in this process. NOACA, our transportation MPO is very engaged. RTA, CMHA, the Cleveland Metro Parks, University Circle Inc., and the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. They're all at the table, and we're working to change not only the way we run operationally as a city, but all these other entities and organizations as well. And so with that, at this time, Madam Chairwoman Cleveland, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Ann Tilley and Kelly Mersman.
Thank you, Councilman Zone. Before we begin, I know Director Collier wanted to make a remark as well, so we're going to give him the space for that.
Thank you, Ann, Callie. Thank you, Councilmember Zone. Thank you to Darnell Brown and everyone else who's been involved with this effort. Given the fact that this is a Health and Human Services Committee meeting, I wanted to just provide a little bit of context as we get into this discussion with respect to the issue of health equity and how this initiative begins to help address that issue. The Vision Zero action team established recently an equity statement. Now, many organizations are putting forth equity statements and making declarations about the importance of equity. One of the things that we want to make sure that we do is not just talk about equity, but really embed it in the approach that we take at the very core of this process. So we understand clearly that injuries and fatalities are population health outcomes, and we feel we must address the root causes of those outcomes. We also understand that past policies, practices, and the neighborhood conditions that exist have contributed to those outcomes. We also recognize that disparities that exist regarding where these outcomes exist and who is being impacted. We have to look at this through the lens of place, race, and health. So we feel that by addressing the determinants or the root causes of traffic fatalities, we can move closer to the goal of getting to zero fatalities in the future. Now, for all the council people who are on the call, when we talk about declaring racism as a public health issue, the meaning of that is the fact that race is at the core of our past decisions and practices that have created advantages for some communities and have disadvantaged other communities. So we know that this has resulted in poor health outcomes in those disadvantaged communities. Vision Zero and its action plan is part of addressing the issue. It is part of the action associated with the declaration made by City Council. The Vision Zero effort begins the process of addressing these outcomes through a systems change approach that includes identifying values, addressing policies, mobilizing and engaging the community, and improving individual and community knowledge about the issues impacting people as it relates to injuries and fatalities. Thank you.
Kelly, you're mute, or Ann, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Director Collier. Like he said, we are really working to focus our work around equity, and we're in the midst of drafting an equity statement that is going to live in our action plan and our future website. So you can see on the screen here, Director Collier led us through a really great exercise of, what does Vision Zero mean to us as a community and as a task force? Those words put together this really beautiful word cloud. And on the right here, we have a few excerpts of, what we hope to achieve as we move forward in this action plan, acknowledging mobility is a civil right. And we want our roads to become a safe place for everyone. But moving forward, I'll turn it over to Kelly to talk a little bit more about what we know is happening in Cleveland and nationally.
Through analyzing data from crash reports in the city of Cleveland, our data and evaluation team has determined that every week on average, approximately 6 Clevelanders are seriously injured on our roadways in traffic crashes. And every year, almost 40 Clevelanders lose their lives on our streets due to traffic crashes. Although 2020 is not over yet, we know almost certainly that this number will be much higher, in part due to the mobility changes around the pandemic. People are moving around less and our streets are emptier, but anecdotally and based on data, we know that people are driving faster, and already the fatalities and serious injuries on Cleveland streets due to traffic crashes are climbing. When we look at national trends across the last decade, we see that traffic fatalities have actually decreased, but when you pull out pedestrian crashes, those are increasing by 35%. So there has been a lot of talk recently in council chambers and in the news about vulnerable road users. Although Vision Zero is about the transportation system as a whole and how it works for everyone, regardless of your mode, we do know that there are some people, those on foot, on bike, potentially in wheelchairs, that don't have the protection of a car or a vehicle around them when they're navigating. And so when we are looking at death and serious injury, those people are especially important to keep in mind.
And as we look at leading causes of death across the country, motor vehicle crashes rank 13th among the leading cause. But when we break that down into age group, we find that motor vehicle traffic crashes are the leading cause of death among people ages 9 to 24. So keeping in mind too that death along with serious injury, which causes life-altering changes, this is affecting our health and well-being of our young population. And I want to share some information that we recently discovered at our most recent task force meeting, that in the last 2 months, we had almost a dozen people who were killed in our streets due to traffic crashes. And the oldest of those people was 32 years old. So this is really a loss of life issue. And this is so important, like Director Collier said, to tying this back to health issues and health equity. And so our work in Vision Zero as a data-driven approach, we have been able to identify where the dangerous crashes are happening in Cleveland. And so this led us to this map that you're seeing on screen, and this is what we call our high injury network. So if you look, the black lines they indicate where the majority of our crashes are happening. And those black lines indicate represent 7% of Cleveland's roads. And that's where roughly a third of fatal and serious crashes happen. So, but then looking more specifically at the red lines, those are the specific 1 mile segments where the crashes are most concentrated. And those segments represent 1.3% of city streets. And that's where 15.6% of our fatalities and serious injuries are happening. So as Director Collier noted, or I believe as Chief Brown noted earlier, there is this disparity of many of our crashes are happening on very few of our streets. And I know, frankly, we are all very, very tired of looking at maps that look like this. We know many of these crashes, especially on the east side, occur in our widest and fastest streets in the city of Cleveland. So when we are approaching this work, we know that this is both a safety and an equity issue.
So as Director Collier said, Vision Zero is really a strategy that is around systems change and an opportunity to take a step back, look at our transportation system holistically, and detail the actions that we need to take to make it safe for all users. Fundamentally, Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, and equitable mobility for all. So what that looks like, if you could go to the next slide, Anne, is a strategy that questions some of the preconceived notions that we might have about our transportation system in general. Chief Brown mentioned that we use the word crash, not accident, because the idea is that traffic deaths and serious injuries are in fact preventable. We're all human. We make mistakes, whether we're in a car or on a bike or in a bus, basically wherever we are, right? And we also know that we are fragile as humans. We are vulnerable to injury. And so the idea is that the transportation system should be designed to account for human error, but to make sure that that is not a deadly mistake or a mistake that results in serious injury that follows someone for life. This approach really underlines the right to safe travel for all. And there are 4 key elements that help factor into that under a Vision Zero approach. So I'm going to go through them relatively quickly, but share some examples about what is included in these components of safe speeds, safe streets, safe vehicles, and safe people. As we have mentioned to date, safe speed is really incredibly fundamental to safe roadway. And so a lot of what you will see in Vision Zero strategies is around speed management. That's for 2 main reasons. As you can see in the image on the left, if you are in a car and you're going about 15 miles per hour, your brain has time and your eyes have time to take in the full periphery of what is around you. You can see pedestrians on the sidewalk, maybe someone lining up to cross, a bus stopped in the distance. When you're going 30 miles per hour or even faster, that field of view narrows. And so you're really only able to take in what is exactly in front of you. All of that activity to the side that could represent a potential crash is blocked out. Also, when you're going faster, there's both a reaction time to when you touch the brake, which is represented by sort of the white bars on the graph to the right. And then your car has some stopping distance as well. So as you can see, when you're going faster, your car moves a lot farther down the roadway, even after you've touched the brake before it comes to a complete stop. And so that increased distance, both the reaction time that is needed as well as the physical, mechanical need of your car to come to a complete stop are much higher when you're going faster, which can lead to you inadvertently hitting things and potentially seriously injuring or killing someone. So, and if you'll go to the next slide, you'll see that research bears this out, that cars that are going faster that hit a pedestrian result in a significant increase in the likelihood of fatality due to that crash. If you have a vehicle that's going 20 miles per hour that hits someone, they have only a 10% likelihood of fatality or serious injury for that pedestrian, compared to a 40-mile-per-hour vehicle, which has an 80% chance of killing or seriously injuring the pedestrian. This focus on speeds really gets to the issue that Anne highlighted as she went through the equity statement for the Vision Zero task force. What we're focusing on here are people's right to move around the city safely. That may mean sacrificing some speed and convenience for some road users to make sure that people are not seriously injured or killed on the roadway. And so speed is really a very important underlying factor in the safety of our roadways. Fortunately, we have some tools that we can use to manage speeds. One of those is through design. So you'll see some photos of different street treatments here that can help manage speed. Those include things like speed tables, neighborhood traffic circles, or even partial diversions from streets to discourage cars from using them as throughways if they are in fact neighborhood and residential streets. There are some complicating factors to using these things. As with anything, our streets are important ways that people access emergency care and services. We always have to make sure that snowplows and ambulances and fire trucks and garbage trucks can navigate these types of things. But other cities have shown, and we're working in Cleveland to show that that it is possible to have safer streets through design while still accounting for access to all of those services. There are additional street design treatments such as road diets, which involve taking 4-lane roads and inserting a center turn lane, potentially some bike infrastructure to calm the streets. Curb extensions give pedestrians a shorter crossing distance and improve their visibility for oncoming cars by bumping out around parking lanes into the roadway. And we have a lot of examples of high visibility crosswalks that highlight the areas where we should expect pedestrians in Cleveland. The photo here is from Lorraine Avenue. In addition to safe speeds and safe streets, we need safe vehicles. And so that can mean a lot of things depending on what the vehicle type is. Large trucks that can potentially override bicyclists and pedestrians can install things like side guards, which protect that area of the truck. Cleveland is currently in the process of piloting side guards on our waste management trucks. So you can expect to see those late this fall or over the winter. There are also technologies like automatic detection and braking that are coming into cars now. Utility vehicles and public service vehicles like fire trucks in some places have been engineered to be able to navigate safer and tighter street designs. And finally, we have a transit system here in Cleveland. In addition to being able to navigate the roads safer multimodally due to bike racks and things like that on buses, research has also shown that transit is basically the safest mode to get around. Rates of fatalities and serious injuries are lowest for transit riders. And in fact, the higher the percentage of people that use transit in a city, the safer it is for all road users. So that is an important part of having safe vehicles on the road. The final component to a typical Vision Zero approach is safe people. So although we are under a Vision Zero approach, is really about designing roadways and systems that allow people to make mistakes. We also know that things like seatbelts, being educated about how to ride and walk safely, avoiding distracted driving or inebriated, inhibited driving in any way are really important to keeping ourselves and the people around us safe. And so Vision Zero underscores safe behaviors like this and really creates a system that emphasizes these messages and makes it easy for people to make the right choices.
And as Councilman Zone alluded to earlier, this has been something our group has been working on for over 2 years now. And this is why we're coming to you today. You know, we're really ready to move. We've collected the data. We've really been doing our homework, but we're ready to move towards actual action. And so we began again with the gathering of data. You know, we put together a task force that has both internal and external stakeholders to make this a really broad coalition of people coming together to make our streets safer. We did have that great symposium from the national director of the Vision Zero Network. She was awesome. And we released our high injury network there. And so we began starting to engage the community and let them know about Vision Zero and what we're hoping to do. But as we move forward, we hope to kind of dig deeper into our neighborhoods. And so we did release an RFP for a consultant to help us write this action plan. We should have someone hopefully picked in the next couple of weeks, and then we would have that beginning in, I believe October is when we would have that consultant come on board. But I do want to emphasize, I think what has made this working group so successful is this really thoughtful put together of our task force. It's broken up into 5 subcommittees, as you can see here: design engineering, enforcement, data and evaluation, fleet and vehicle maintenance, and that education and engagement. And so both of those are chaired by both a city person and a non-city person. So, and there's also a very diverse makeup of the groups themselves. So again, hearkening back to this very broad coalition to put this work forward. And so as we move forward with our action plan, those groups are going to continue to do their work and move forward, but work really collaboratively with our consultant. And then so looking at kind of the steps we've put in place to get us to this point, all of these subcommittees have put together a tremendous amount of work. As you can see on this screen, you know, we're looking at what is our capital planning process, and, you know, how do we shape that to fit engagement and fitting or meeting people where they are, you know, looking at some of these unusual intersections to, you know, prep us for what we can change. We've also looked at our crash data, looking at those important areas that we need to address. And then we're currently working to get some other access to key data sources that help strengthen our knowledge of what's going on in our streets. We've also, again, started spreading the word, starting to engage our residents. That's something that will continue. Our fleet and maintenance is, again, like Callie said, looking at the Sideguard pilot project on our waste trucks, but also looking at how we're maintaining our bike lanes and our trails to make sure that it's safe for people to use even in the winter when there's snow and debris, but making sure that those are clear. Enforcement is definitely an area I say that its role has evolved. We recognize that the role of enforcement is very unique, and we don't want to create punitive measures for anyone on our roads. So, but perhaps looking at, you know, how can we create a more equitable enforcement? You know, how can we use restorative justice rather than strict policing measures? And then lastly, all these groups have kind of put together some of these more policy-driven initiatives. So, you know, we did do a complete review of our Complete and Green Streets Ordinance, which was introduced last week. But we're also coordinating with ODOT to look at how we sign our streets for speed limits, because that is something that's pretty governed, but at the state level. I promise I'm almost done talking. I know I've talked a lot, but we do want to recognize the action that council has already put forward towards Vision Zero, and we're very grateful to have the support Like Councilman Zone said, 2 years ago, we did put out this resolution that created the Vision Zero Task Force, convening groups, putting together this group. Also in the fall, there was the authorization to actually put this action plan forward. And then lastly, there was financial contribution towards this action plan from a few council members to put our dollars where we want to make change. So I'll turn it over to Callie. Now we're kind of talking about our action plan and what we're hoping to achieve from this.
Thanks, Anne. As Anne mentioned earlier, we are in the very final stages of selecting a consultant to work with us on the action plan for Vision Zero. This plan will focus on obviously actionable items, strategies that have defined timelines, responsible parties, and any necessary funding estimates attached to them. The idea is that it is a blueprint for us to move forward on this systemic change, the need for which we've outlined here today. The consultant will allow us to build on data and evaluation that has been done already by the subcommittee focused on that, to evaluate our current conditions and identify things that need to change, whether those are emphasis areas that are leading to the serious injuries and fatalities on our roadway network, or procedures and policies we have in place now that could be adjusted to make way for a safer transportation system. Engaging residents, listening to them, and integrating their feedback into the plan is also a key component of the action plan process. We will not only be sharing with them, like we have with you today, what Vision Zero is, but listening to their lived experiences and integrating those into the plan. This will culminate in both a citywide strategy that's high level and aims us toward policy and systems change, and also a very targeted and geographically specific plan around the high injury network. We know that community and data-driven strategies are important throughout the action plan, but specifically on those corridors and the map that Anne highlighted for you earlier today, there will be targeted and really focused conversations with residents and stakeholders along those corridors and geographically specific strategies to make those roadways safer. If you could go to the next slide, Anne. This plan will be managed out of city planning under the leadership of Director Collier, although as we have mentioned several times, there are many stakeholders involved in this process already, and the creation of an effective and representative plan will obviously necessitate the engagement and integration of many more stakeholders and residents. As Anne mentioned, we are looking to kick off the action plan in about a month or so, 4 to 6 weeks. We would invite you, we understand this is a very preliminary overview of what Vision Zero is and what the picture on Cleveland's roads are right now. We would invite you to sit down with us and talk in more detail about the picture of your ward. We have more specific data insights that we can share and dive into roadways that are in your areas. We also know that you field a lot of constituent requests through your offices, people that are concerned about speeding or crashes happening outside their homes and businesses. And we're interested in capturing those and integrating those into our planning process. And then finally, we would love to talk with you about outreach opportunities to connect with your residents, whether you have monthly or quarterly newsletters or email lists or phone trees to help connect them with the opportunity to contribute, be engaged, learn about, share their experiences in the Vision Zero action plan. So with that, I think we have time for questions and answers, but I'll turn it back over to the chair. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you today.
Thank you, Callie, and thank you, Anne, for your thorough presentation. I had the chance to be briefed earlier this summer about this, and I also, as you mentioned, attended the symposium that was held about a year ago, last August. And, you all have done such tremendous work over the last 2 years. And, I'm impressed with the comprehensive, the depth of the information, and also the breadth of the people who are involved, your subcommittees, and the type of, in the information that, you all have collected. So again, I commend you all, and to my colleague, Councilman Zone, and to Chief Darnell Brown, the co-chairs. Again, you've really been very visionary about this whole process, and it's something that's going to be a great benefit for the city of Cleveland. And to Director Collier's comments, again, I'm just thinking, we passed the racism as a public health crisis resolution in June. It was introduced in March, but the work here just really symbolizes that we have, as the city of Cleveland, been engaged in trying to make all of our systems and processes more equitable. This is not something that we just started, but a process that we've been engaged in on many levels for a few years now. And so, and we know there's so much more work to be done, but again, I just wanted to say that, and I did have just a couple of questions, and I know we have some hands up, and some of our other colleagues who've also been very engaged in this process. But again, just big kudos to you all, and you did, your presentation was very good as well. My first question, one of the things that was mentioned this morning, and we know is true, but just like we're seeing the heightened violence in the community, we are also seeing a tremendous increase in the number of serious and fatal motor vehicle accidents. It seems like every weekend, and not necessarily just weekends, but we're seeing serious car crashes. People are running into buildings, cars flipping over on the freeways, and I'm just wondering. I know, again, this is more of a recent phenomenon, but is there any data or any information that you all have come across, recently that explains what's happening, and why now? If it's related to COVID, but again, you mentioned more people are staying home, but why? Why are so many crashes happening now? Why are so many serious crashes happening now? I've never seen the number of fatalities and serious accidents over a short period of time.
Madam Chairman, if I could.
Yes, Chief Brown.
Yes. Yeah, if I could, I'll take a stab at this, and I'd ask the team to weigh in. You kind of have really kind of fleshed out the issue. A lot of it is related to COVID-19 and the fact that there are fewer people and traffic out on the roads. And so as a result, people are actually speeding in many respects. And if you take as an example, some two locations in particular, I know Kinsman is a major artery in our community that connects us and a lot of suburban communities. So there's a lot of traffic on it. And I believe East 55th Street and Woodland Kinsman is probably the most hazardous in terms of crashes intersection in the state. So when you take something like that and you add folks taking liberties because they know that there's fewer number of vehicles out there, the tendency to speed, you are exacerbating the problem. I think Callie and Ann were kind of talking about what happens when you incrementally increase the speed that you operate a vehicle, what the outcomes are in terms of impact with either another object, person, etc., or immovable object. The ability or the percentage of the survival rate diminishes as speed increases. So I think it's a combination of all those things. So, but I would ask the team to weigh in on that particular issue or any other thing they want to add to what I said.
Director Collier, not to that I have or know of any current data, but when you think about what you experience on a day-to-day basis since COVID, and I just want to build on Chief Brown's point, because I think you hit it right on the head. That excess pavement does create the perception that people have certain liberties and freedoms. And I think one of the things that we're trying to determine or figure out with respect to how we rethink our streets is one of the things that we learned with is respect to when you start to limit traffic conditions where the road isn't always just about getting cars through it. And you start putting in design measures and other types of interventions that tend to slow traffic, you tend to see less fatalities. So the reutilization of our roads, I think, is going to be important. And I think COVID has taught us two things. One is what Chief Brown alluded to. But the second thing it's teaching us, and just a few examples with our outdoor dining program that we're running, where we're utilizing our road right-of-ways for alternative purposes, because streets in the future are going to be places, not just designed for people to move through, but for people to experience. And I think that second prong of that, so there's the issue with too much pavement and people being able to move through quickly, but there's also the opportunity to shrink the street, give road diets where necessary. And I think COVID demonstrates that opportunity for us. So I think we have to look at it in those two realms. The why right now, I think definitely is what Chief Brown alludes to, with people driving because they have so much excess space, and they're realizing that's not a license to speed. But the other piece of that, though, is that we have an opportunity in front of us right now, due to less traffic being on the streets, to demonstrate how the future of our streets can potentially look. And this is why this is so timely with respect to the action plan.
Right.
Thank you. Yes.
Councilwoman, I wanted to, to your point about the data. So when we look at the crash reports that come from ODOT, they're uploaded to a database. We can see, based on the objective narrative, if it was a roadway departure, they hit a fixed object. Those are generally things you don't see if you're driving at a slow speed. So, that would be an indication, those kinds of crashes, that it was due to speed. Although it might be a minute before we get that data. I know there's generally a lag. We're working to kind of straighten out that process and get that data more efficiently. But we will be able to see that in the next couple months. We'll be able to look at those crash reports and have a better indication.
Okay, thank you. And my next question, we talked, a big component of this is, the engineering and design of our streets, and Director Colley just mentioned, things like road diets and the other interventions that you all mentioned. In the next few weeks, I'm going to have RTA in to our transportation committee to talk about their system design survey and what the results of that were. And so is someone from RTA involved in this process, number one? And if you're not doing so, we definitely need to coordinate with them with respect to the results of their findings with their survey, as well as, how they go forward and how we all go forward in making sure that, we achieve the goals of Vision Zero.
Well, I'll jump in here through the chair to our colleagues. RTA, a planner from RTA, Amy Snell, is very active on our working group. The organization is very well versed in our strategy and the work we're doing. As far as responding to your question about leading up to your hearing, I would defer to Callie or Ann to help make those arrangements or add any more context.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Ann or Callie, did you want to?
Go ahead, Callie.
Yes, thank you. In addition to Amy with the planning department at RTA, we also have some systems employees from RTA active on our committees. I believe they're involved in several of the 5 that we talked about. And we also have representatives from Clevelanders for Public Transit involved in the task force. So actually at our last task force committee meeting, we had a presentation about transit and transportation equity and how those things really integrate with the Vision Zero initiative. So they are involved. We look forward to really working very closely with them in the development of the action plan strategies to make sure that transit is supported and integrated into that work.
Right, and I would also add that you know, in working with this consultant on our action plan, there's going to be a lot of dialogue of, you know, what are the plans that are already in existence in Cleveland? You know, what are the future plans? What are the different networks we need to consider? So that's something we very much highlighted with a consultant, of taking a good look of what's going on the ground in Cleveland and how does our action plan fit with that work.
And I will add that currently we are integrating a lot of the Vision Zero principles into our current planning work. We have been working in the Opportunity Corridor area. So we recently had a discussion with the Local Development Corporation, Burton Bell Carr, myself, Chief Brown, and some of our internal team on looking at how to improve treatments along Kinsman Avenue, given the fact that there's significant investment taking place around the Opportunity Corridor. And by virtue of that investment, you know, we anticipate people are going to be living and moving in that geography, be it a business or resident. So Kinsman Avenue, as you know, is a major thoroughfare. It's on the network that you saw with the map that was illustrated earlier. And safety will be an increased concern. And we see opportunities real time to start to address some of these Vision Zero principles.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple other things. I've been recently reading a couple of articles with data showing that there's a correlation between areas where there are high traffic accidents, you know, serious and fatalities. There's a correlation between those areas and high crime areas in cities. This wasn't specific to Cleveland, and I just found that very interesting, but intuitively it makes sense. And I don't know if that's something that you all have come across or discussed in any of your meetings or any of the subcommittees.
So I'll start off. So when we first released the high injury network, the first thing our enforcement committee said, and you know, that committee comprises multiple traffic officers from CPD. The first thing they said was, you know, wow, that looks very, very similar to our heat map of the crime areas. So you know, that's not data we've specifically dug into, but you know, the fact that our officers could say that right away, I think lends to this belief that they could be related. But I personally believe that, you know, it's not just happening in a vacuum. There's a lot of other issues at play as well. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak to that, but that was what came to my head first.
Thank you. Anyone else care to comment?
I think part of what has to be studied further, Councilwoman, is really the linkage between the outcomes of those statistics that you referenced with respect to high crime, you know, correlating with fatalities. And there's a lot of assumptions that can be made as it relates to that, whether it'd be interesting to know how many high-speed chases have taken place, you know, along these corridors in certain areas, right? That's a criminal related activity. You know, when you look at low-income communities, one of the things that we've seen, and Callie has some slides that actually show that in some of the other presentations that have been given, where you see road conditions are not as solid in areas where you see disinvestment, right? So if you have poor road conditions, you probably don't have identifiable crosswalks, and you don't have those fundamentals that equal a safety scenario in a neighborhood. So those community conditions are extremely important. And this is why looking at it from an equity perspective, I think is going to be critical with making sure that we are intentional about investing where disinvestment has occurred over many years. And I do want to say, going back to the race piece of this, when you think about it from a policy perspective, historically, race was the value proposition, or racism was the value proposition. It's how people decided where to invest and where not to invest. So the reason why this equity piece is so critical for Vision Zero is because we want to try to flip that on its head and say that, look, let's be intentional about equity as being the value proposition so we can right those wrongs. And hopefully you can start to see where you can identify those correlations between disadvantaged communities and, where those high incidences of, fatalities or injuries are. You can start to really hone in on that and start to blur those lines a bit.
Right. Thank you, Director. Just one final point, and I'll turn the floor over to my colleagues. And I just want to say, under your action plan, one of the first things that you're going to be doing is sitting down with us individually as council people to talk about our boards. And I just want to really emphasize that, and ask that you all be pretty assertive about reaching out to our colleagues. I don't want to be a few months down the road when people say they don't know what's going on and what's happening. So, and if you need our help in coordinating those meetings and conversations, then please call on council leadership to do that. Again, this is very important information, and it's going towards improving the city, but also improving our own individual neighborhoods in our ward. So with that, first person on the list is Council President Kevin Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, first of all, of course, I want to just really recognize all the hard work that went into this. This is really a tremendous effort, led by Councilman Zone and Darnell. Ann and Kelly have been tremendous, and Director Collier as well. This is how these things should be done. This is how we should plan things going forward. So I have two areas of questioning. It may end up just being two questions. First of all, procedurally, we authorized the funding for the consultant, and we passed a resolution. Are there any council actions that need to happen to further Vision Zero as we are here on the 31st of August? To whoever might know that.
Madam Chairman, could I take the first attempt at responding?
Yes, Councilman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. To Council President Kelly. At this point, no, but we will learn stuff through working with the consultant. The task force felt it was important to do this presentation to the entire council prior to the consultants getting out there in the community. But this action and the taking vision to action very well might require some legislative actions by the council at some point in the future. Don't know what they are at this point today, but at this moment, I would say no. I don't know, Darnell, Chief Brown or Director Collier or Callie or Ann, if you have any comment to that.
You're correct. There's nothing. Sorry, Chief. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I could, through the chair, I agree with you 100%, Councilman, that the work of the consultant really is the next iteration. And based on that outcome, we'll get some direction as to actions or activities that we need to do either legislatively or policy-wise to enact a number of the recommendations that come out of the plan or the process. I see that as due diligence by the consultant and then again, a sharing of that information with this body and the administration so that we know what types of recommendations and what are the issues that are identified that need to be addressed in terms of prioritization, low, medium, high level, low hanging fruit, et cetera. So I think that that will come out of this work, and we should be ready and prepared to move that agenda when it becomes clear to us the things that we actually need to do to actualize this plan.
Thank you. And then through the chair, having spoken with Councilman Zone and Ann about, really kind of making, 2020, like really taking steps forward in Vision Zero, and making it a priority. My question is, were we set back at all on our timeline because of the pandemic, or are we about where we need to be? Whomever can answer that.
Madam Chair, to the council president, I'll take the first shot at that. I know we were actually, in my opinion, we have not slowed down our process. We continue to meet virtually and move the process forward. I think that the only thing that might have slowed down a little bit was making sure that we had all the dollars in place, but we did all the work on getting the RFP ready, meeting internally. So I think we're in a good spot. I don't know that we missed a lot due to COVID-19 and the pandemic.
Right.
I know, if I can jump in. So we knew kind of from the beginning, and I don't think we expressed this in our slide. This is a significant amount of time that's going to go into this action planning process. We're anticipating about a year, just to make sure we're getting the engagement we need, and the actual thoughtful process of this. So I don't think our work has slowed, but we do need to consider that this is a lengthy process.
Great, thank you. And that is kind of leads to my next question, which is, when a consultant is hired, and the action plan moves forward, and if we're looking at a year-long plus process, which I understand these things do take time. Another thing that we've talked about a lot, that is the shrinking of streets and narrowing and calming traffic. Like, that's a big part, but that's a lot easier to what I found in my travels and doing several of these projects is that that's easier to talk about and plan about than it is to execute, because when you've got buildings and you've got catch basins and you've got when you've got to work with ODOT for their traffic count, because a lot of these streets that we're talking about are state routes. Those are great big challenges to actually execute the traffic calming. So in terms of the ultimate goal, which is reducing deaths and providing safer means of travel, what's something we can expect by the end of 2021 to bring down that 37 deaths per year, that 6 accidents per week? What's a shorter term tangible goal that we can hope for as we move forward? To anybody who can answer.
I think we all may have some response to that. Some of it was illustrated in the presentation. Some of the interventions that we would consider low-hanging fruit. One, we have to make sure that our basic traffic devices are capitalized on and improved. Time traffic signals. Every neighborhood should have those. All right, the countdown meters. When we did the Safe Routes to School initiative, for example, one of the things that we highlighted was something as fundamental as being able to actually see all of your crosswalks. These are very simple things that can go a long way with sort of this real-time, low-hanging fruit type of improvement. The other thing that we're going to have to look at in the near and long term, Councilman, as well, is rethinking our streets with respect to short streets that could potentially be closed to traffic and more pedestrian oriented. These are not things that we're trying to force into existence because they're cool. This is the trajectory of the world. And let me explain what I mean when I say this. You look at in the next decade, all vehicles are going to be electric. This is going to happen. This is not a maybe, philosophical type of discussion. This is something that is going to take place. So cars will operate differently. They'll have different needs with respect to the right of way. If you add in e-bikes, e-scooters, and all of these modes, what that means is that our streets are going to become more dynamic. And I also referenced this temporary outdoor dining piece that we have in play, because this is a litmus test that allows us to kind of see how can our streets, function when they become not just thoroughfares or pass-throughs, but when people are occupying those spaces. I mean, I don't want to age myself, but all of you who are probably 70s babies or, born in the 60s or even the 50s know, you remember the block parties, right? You close off your street, people come out and the community come together, play music. Those were examples. Open streets, which was done by Callie here earlier. These are all examples, getting people to understand that streets can be more than what ODOT and our engineers have traditionally thought of them to be. And I think that this is going to force that acceleration, Council President, of how we need to move quickly on dealing with the low-hanging fruit pieces, but how we need to also accelerate a more aggressive push toward embracing the future, because technically the future is now.
Understanding,
And if I-
understanding all that, I guess my question would be, if we're looking at a very long-term planning process, which is important, and accelerating different ways of how we look at streets. I guess my question is, you mentioned things like the traffic timing, the crosswalks, countdown stuff. Like, why aren't we doing that now? And what is it if we're looking at taking down that number of 37 and 6? What can we hope for by the end of 2021?
Madam Chair, to the Council President, if I could, one thing we probably should have said early on in the process is that there were already a number of things that the city of Cleveland was doing prior to this Vision Zero strategy that were really kind of compliant or correlated with a lot of these types of activities. So the work that MAVIC does routinely on signalization, crosswalks, et cetera, that he's been doing for years was designed to have help some of these impacts, if you would. The whole issue with, as an example, something you don't think of, citywide LED street lighting, which helps visibility, which should go a long ways towards helping with some of the impacts or the effects of visibility as it relates to crashes at night, et cetera. If you look at the fact that data has informed us as to what are the small percentage of streets that contribute to the large percentage of locations, that's important. And then the last thing I would add, Council President, that's going to be an outcome is knowing the behavior change campaign that's going to have to take place, because we can do all of these things, but we have to change the behavior of the public as well.
Okay, so I don't ask this question to do anything to diminish the hard work of people. If you don't know the answer, you don't know the answer, and that's okay. If it's not defined, I guess my question, and you can get back to me after the meeting because I don't want to take up any more time on this same question. What I'd like to know is, this is an admirable long-term planning process, but we've got an immediate crisis of fatalities and crashes. Of the things that were just discussed, it sounds like much of them are in progress or should be done already through traffic engineering. So can we look at a realistic timeline for what can get done in the short term? What can get done by 2021? Is it going to be requiring side guards on trucks and vehicles? Is it going to be, making sure that all of our street projects, all of the crosswalks are more brilliant, making sure that the countdown is there, making sure they're at time. So I'll take my answer offline, but I just kind of want to push for like a short, like a result that we can like really look at, kind of time our progress to. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to all of our presenters.
You have to unmute, Phyllis.
Councilwoman Jasmine Santana.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. Great presentation. I can tell that there's been a lot of work and commitment to the Vision Zero effort. So thank you. I'll be brief, just through the chair and to whoever can answer. I think Director Collier may have answered this, but I thought I would just kind of throw it out there. So my concern is really about speeding within the neighborhood. Just a week ago, there was a car crash in front of my house at a car that was going 80 miles. And so a neighbor was about 10 seconds from getting hit by this vehicle. And so this is happening more since, of course, the COVID, right? Blame everything on COVID-19, but it's been happening more in the neighborhood. We're getting a lot of calls about, kids are out of school, they're playing outside, and the families are worried about their kids being hit. So this might be a question for the consultant, but what are the plans for decreasing speeding within the neighborhood? Are we thinking about this in addition to the streets that have the most fatalities? In my ward would be West 25th.
So I'll take a stab at that, Councilman, first acknowledging that issue in the neighborhood, given we live in the same neighborhood. My street obviously is right off the highway. So we get a lot of what I consider stray traffic, where people are coming off the highway. They're stopping at the Jones home or they're cutting through the neighborhood and they're coming at pretty high speeds. I also have witnessed residents who live in the neighborhood, that cars that I see frequently that are driving at high rates of speed. One of the things that we were discussing in some of our conversations through the master planning effort, is when you look at neighborhood solutions and low-level solutions, we talked about everything from putting maybe speed bumps, on certain streets, because there's nothing that'll make you slow down than a speed bump if it tears up your car. So I think part of what we have to do moving forward is through these processes, identify interventions that makes the most sense for a certain community. There are some universal solutions, but in some neighborhoods, there are unique interventions that can take place because you can't do everything on every street. I'll give you an example. Franklin Avenue was a street that was looked at with Councilman Zone, I believe we started that in 2017, I believe, right, Callie? The examination of Franklin. Franklin was straight up a spree thoroughfare, and you had all, if not mostly residential on Franklin Boulevard. And when you started to look at some of the treatments that are being proposed for Franklin and that's intending to be implemented, it's going to calm traffic. The traffic circle that's being proposed there could actually contribute to slowing traffic, but it's all going to be about dollars and cents and making sure that you have the right intervention for the right street. That has to come from both the community as well as the administration. And let me say this while I'm on this subject matter, because I want to be very clear with respect to the dollars and cents conversation. As federal policy changes, and these federal policies are done in such a way that supports the types of activities we want on the ground, I think the easier it'll be for us as local government to implement these things more swiftly. The other thing that I think we have to ready ourselves for, which I think this action plan is going to help us, and this is a precursor to the update of our comprehensive plan as it relates to mobility, there will be an infrastructure bill that's going to come to fruition. The question is, how ready will we be? The federal government's philosophy has always been this shovel-ready notion. That means that when those dollars become available, you have to have a plan, you have to have some detailed designs, and you have to be ready to move. So this is why this is so critical with respect to Vision Zero, with respect to the comp plan, and with respect to making sure that all of our strategies are in place, because that money flow really dictates the speed in which we're able to do things. Often with local government, and you guys know this because you're legislators and you're making decisions about this every day, you're trying to make $1 out of 15 cents all the time, and the demands keep increasing. So how do we be strategic about the resources that we have, but also be good advocates with respect to state and federal government about the value proposition that they put on their dollars that trickle down to us?
Thank you, Director. So, and then I'll just kind of close with this. The action plan is not going to be in place yet, right? It's about to take about a year, but crashes are happening now, right? Families are at risk right now in these neighborhoods. So what could we do, or what the planning committee or department, or what could we do now? I know it's part of enforcement as well. I live down the street from 2nd District, so there's definitely no respect if they're driving by at 80 miles. But what could we do now? What are we thinking about now, action steps that we could do to kind of help, with all these fatal accidents in the neighborhood?
One, we need to implement the plans that we have on the books now. Okay, number one, and I'll use safe routes as an example. We have been awarded for the last several years. What was the amount, Callie? Is it $400,000 a year for the implementation of our Safe Routes Master Plan, which has some very straightforward solutions with a heck of a why. And that why is really making sure that students can get to school safely to school and back home. So those resources are attached to that plan. And we know those resources are continuing to come in. And we've been working with MOCAP to implement a lot of the recommendations in the Safe Routes Plan that deal with, crosswalks by schools, making sure that, sidewalks and things of that nature are improved. So these are low-hanging fruit things. The other thing that, we again have to think about, and I use this notion of when we do infrastructure projects, and we know that there's opportunity to capitalize on that investment and not just do it the same way that it was, because a lot of things that we may do is replacement type of activity. But if we can start to intervene with some of those interventions or tweak designs in a way that contribute to that safety. So I talked a little bit about the time traffic signals. These are slight upgrades. We talk about, the parking indentations or the curb bump outs for the buses. We talk about pedestrian refuge islands. These are some small but very effective tools. If you look at what we did on MLK and the improvements that we've made around the cultural gardens area, those were tremendous improvements. But when we try to do those things, the biggest weight on our shoulders is trying to be creative with respect to collaborations and pulling together all of those pieces of resources that we need to make it the best that it can possibly be. So it's always a hustle, and this is why I think the funding streams have to be more robust. And I think we're on the horizon with an infrastructure bill that may take us from 0 to 50 in the next few years. So I think that's important to get ready for that.
Go ahead, Callie.
No, I thought he was done, but go ahead.
Oh, Callie, go ahead.
I would just say that over the last several months, I've been in several conversations with residents along with Commissioner Mavic about speeding concerns on their residential streets. He does have counting and speed capture equipment that can be deployed in certain areas to get that data to really illustrate the magnitude of the problem. I think that's a good place to start so that we and our engineers can really understand what's going on and then develop solutions along with the residents to address what they're seeing on the streets. And then also sort of addressing Council President's question about what we're doing now. I think one important thing to underline is that the map that Ann showed with those high crash corridors and high injury network really allow us to focus in on planning and capital improvements that are happening already with that lens of increased safety on those hotspots. So for example, ODOT had pedestrian safety improvement funds available to large metro areas about a year ago. And because that data analysis had already been done, we could focus those pedestrian improvement dollars on the corridors that we knew were most dangerous in those hotspots. So we've talked a lot about a long planning process, but because of the conversations and the data analysis that are already happening, we're able to be infusing those insights into what are routine improvements that the city are making, but with a special focus on safety based on the data that we're seeing.
Okay. And to the chair, to the councilwoman, if I can just quickly add, one, to your point of, what are we doing in the residential areas? even though we will be having an area of focus on our high injury network, we still want to look at a citywide strategy that makes all of our roads safer, not just the ones that have those red lines on them. And also, I do want to emphasize that this conversation we hope to have with all of the council members to really get a good idea of, well, what will resonate in your neighborhood? What does your neighborhood need? That can sort of lead us down a path of what we can do now. And I would add, I think, you know, planning and design issues take a long time. I think we can start on the education right away. So I know Councilman Zone has put up some really beautiful signs in his neighborhood. You know, those are strategies I think we can put in the ground very quickly. Oh, there it is. Yeah, nice. So I don't want to say that, you know, the design and planning is not important, because that's one of the strongest tools we have. But I think we can still rely on some of the other strategies we know that can work.
Well, thank you everyone for answering my question. I look forward to meeting about the plans in Ward 14. Good job to my colleague, Matt Zone, and everyone involved.
Thank you, Councilwoman Santana. Councilman Charles Slife.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I have just a few questions, starting with through the chair to Chief Brown. One of the questions I get more than I would have anticipated is, you know, why does the city always hire a consultant? We've got, you know, thousands of employees, a lot of talent, people who know the neighborhoods. So, you know, it seems like there's always this, we hire a consultant, maybe they're familiar with the community, maybe they aren't, we pay money. They come up with good recommendations, and, you know, I'll kind of leave it there for now. But I guess, could you describe for me kind of the value add of hiring a consultant in this situation versus kind of aggregating all the data that we have through NOAC or through ODOT, wherever, and you know, using the in-house talent that we have at our disposal.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, to the councilman, I'll take a shot at that, and then I'll ask my colleague to weigh in as well. All right, so there is such a thing as subject matter expertise. All right, and so above and beyond just general engineering services or an understanding of the value of empirical data, et cetera, having someone who is familiar with the whole Vision Zero proposition and kind of all of the, you know, the whistles and bells that go with it in order to make sure that it's an effective strategy, that it's comprehensive, and that it's not just a cut and paste based on something that was done in, you know, Boston or New York or Chicago. That the Vision Zero strategy has to be one that's custom fitted and designed based on the inputs for the city of Cleveland, understanding what our infrastructure issues and challenges are, what our data has informed us are the most rigorous challenges, and then how does that fit or align with our past and future capital planning processes and our existing street grid, if you would. So it's got to be customized and built for this city. That would be my response to that. And there is expertise that we do need to make sure that we get all of the elements into an effective strategy, including an implementation strategy in terms of how to do it, not just what to do, but how to do it, and then how to communicate it and get it implemented citywide. I think those are important values that a consultant brings.
And Madam Chairman, I would just add to what Chief Brown said. With respect to this specific initiative, Councilman Slife, it's not just a City of Cleveland initiative, right? We're trying to change systems. We're trying to change practices. The county has money into this plan. Some of the foundations have money into this study, as well as the City of Cleveland and council members. So in order to create a level of almost transparency and almost independence from the city just doing it and then acting on it on our own, we felt it was best to bring somebody, as Chief Brown said, a subject matter expertise outside, as well as our 5 subcommittees that are are working, when we set up this structure early on, we wanted to make sure that we had co-chairs, somebody inside of government and somebody outside of government. So you have that natural friction of creativity that is happening, pushing government to make better outcomes for the citizen. And we know that going this route with the consultant on this specific action will yield a much better product and will create, I think, potentially less criticism from our constituency. Let's face it, right? The city of Cleveland, we've been under siege over time. People are skeptical of decisions that we make. And I can assure you that our colleagues here on this call are making decisions based on what's in the best interest of people and community. But that's why we felt for this particular initiative, having a consultant come in would be the best route to go.
I appreciate that. Go ahead, Freddie.
Madam Chairman, to Councilman Slight, is that a broader question, or were you speaking specifically to this initiative?
Well, I think it is a broader question that, you know, it's a broader question that I think is worth asking in instances, because, you know, this is not the subject matter for this hearing, but we have a consultant looking at our waste collection system, and, you know, I don't believe council's been updated on how that's proceeding, or there's been any citizen input. So there's a perception, certainly in the community, that, you know, a consultant is somewhat of a code word for, you know, where projects go when you don't want it to be transparent, and, you know, or you just kind of want something to die off. And to the extent that that could be true, or that it's just perception, I think it's important to point it out and just to hammer home that whether it is the city staff who we have easier access to, or some external party, that we are maintaining this line of communication, and we feel like we're really able to make sure that, you know, we're getting updates midstream to ensure that the end product is well informed and as useful as it can be. So and just I'll move on from there. I appreciate the information on consultants, but, you know, a good way to segue out of that is, you know, I fear that there are situations where we get a great document and excellent recommendations, but then when it's handed over to the city of Cleveland and it becomes our onus to implement them, that our residents don't feel that we're effectively implementing them, or that we're coming up with individual scenarios why specific specific strategies aren't applicable in any of the situations where we'd like them to be. And I guess a good example of that, Councilwoman Santana mentioned about residential speeding. I have residents asking me every week to install speed bumps or speed tables. There was a news story recently that Akron is piloting it. And as I started speaking with some of my colleagues and some advocates in the community that are, you know, subject matter experts in this area, they kind of chuckled and said, you know, well, good luck, because we've gone that road, and, you know, the city's very reluctant, because whether it's public safety vehicles or snow maintenance, you know, that just they're not going to work. And I guess after you hear that so many times, it just starts to sound like an excuse more than, you know, a real answer. So I can tell you, speed tables on 174th south of Puritas. Callie had mentioned that traffic engineering has a lot of resources at their disposal to survey, you know, speeds and adherence to traffic signs. And it just always seems like when the, you know, people are out there to look at it is when it doesn't happen. But, you know, could I ask specifically what conversations there have been about installing speed tables on residential streets as a form of traffic calming?
Madam Chair, to the councilman, I don't know the specific answer to that, but I'm happy to engage Commissioner Mavick to provide this committee with a response on that resource and anything else that he's doing in that line. I've already made a note of that, so we'll be happy to bring that information back. And if you have questions or concerns on any other initiative or consultant initiative, I'm happy to get you some insight on that as well.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I'd be happy to share with them some information that I received, kind of some research on speed tables in Quebec. I specifically asked for background on a cold weather climate because I didn't want it to be Tampa, and to point out that Tampa doesn't snow. Madam Chair, it looks like I might have interrupted Callie. Was Callie going to say something?
Thank you, Councilman. Through the chairwoman to the councilman. I know that Lakewood has recently piloted a speed table on one of their residential streets over the last winter, and that is through a partnership with NOACA. We did have an opportunity to take some city representatives out to talk with Lakewood staff about that installation. And in the conversations that we've had so far, the real concern is around having an agreed upon standard for both the dimensions of speed tables that will work with our maintenance vehicles, as well as where they're appropriate on city streets. And I think getting also to Councilwoman Santana's question about how to address issues on residential streets, things like a traffic calming policy or guidelines may be something that is recommended through the Vision Zero plan that really does consult with our Mayor's Office of Capital Projects, Traffic Engineering to create those standards and design guides that work for our service vehicles, as well as make sense in terms of a policy that outlines where they're appropriate to be installed on the cities. I think the distinction between the really large, high volume, high speed commercial corridors that Ann outlined in the high injury network and the sort of day-to-day residential issues that we're seeing and hearing about is very important in the action plan. And honestly, the outside expertise of consultants that have worked with other cold weather cities and cities like Cleveland is really important in informing our approach here locally.
Thank you. And two more real quick things. One is there was a comment earlier about us not wanting to be overly punitive with traffic enforcement. I'd actually respectfully like to disagree. I was going 38 miles an hour down Rock River Drive the other day and someone passed me in the turning lane. You know, people go 50 miles an hour down Warren Road through curves and they slam into guardrails and create traffic accidents. You know, Rock River Drive south of Lorraine Avenue is basically treated as a highway on the way to the airport. And it frustrates me that, you know, in other communities, you enter Woodmere and everyone goes 25, you know, and you cross the bridge into Rocky River on Lake Road and everyone slows down because it's known that, you know, it's enforced and taken seriously. And it's my hope that traffic enforcement is built into this because we don't need to be pulling people over because their, you know, left rear wheel accidentally crossed the yellow line when they were turning left. But there's some pretty egregious, you know, traffic maneuvers that I've seen in my day. And to the extent that we need to be supportive of CPD and their traffic enforcement division, I think that's really important. It's you know, I live off of Warren Road and I see cars speeding, running through lights, and it almost just seems like you hit the Cleveland sign and all the rules don't apply anymore to some people. And I think we need to tamp that down. My final comment is just, I think there is an educational component to a lot of this. You know, when I get calls about, or from residents concerned about speeding, their most common ask is a guardrail, you know, and more often than not, the location doesn't meet the requirements for a guardrail. And that creates a lot of frustration because it's interpreted as, well, the city's not taking this seriously. The city seems more inclined to protect the driver going 80 miles an hour than to protect me sitting in my living room when they crash into my house. And to the degree that we can show residents how this all works, how slowing down traffic, even just a little bit, makes residents, children, people walking safer, I think that'll be really important because when you start talking about getting rid of lanes and putting in bike lanes, it can get controversial real fast.
Thank you.
I suppose that's the end of my soapbox, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, if I can respond very quickly to Councilman Slice about enforcement. Okay, Councilwoman, you're muted, but it looked like you said yes.
Yes, but quickly.
Yes, quickly. So yes, this conversation with enforcement is ongoing. Obviously, we don't want to create more situations where members of our Black and Brown communities are over-policed, stopped unnecessarily. But one of the things we are looking at is working with the courts to create a traffic docket, because what you'll find is often a lot of these stops, people are speeding 80 miles down the road. They actually end up getting pled down in court. So people with the financial resources to pay these big fines, get them pled down, enter into plea bargains. You know, there is an imbalance there. So that's just one example we're looking at of how do we make that a little more fair. But again, I want to emphasize an ongoing conversation. We know this is a very delicate matter.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, Ann, I agree with your point. And if we could we look at RTA and the how they used to enforce the fare evasions and who that impacted most. So again, this will be an ongoing conversation because it is absolutely fair. We've got a lot of people who have no respect whatsoever for traffic laws and drive like they're the only ones on the road. And so, this is absolutely, ongoing conversation, and we have to balance, we're going to have to balance the safety and enforcement also with the equitable treatment. Okay, and again, thank you, Councilman Slife and Councilman Kerry McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be brief. I just want to echo the thanks to you and to Councilman Zone and others for all of the work on this. It's really exciting. And Chief Brown and all, I almost called you Chief Collier, or give you a promotion there, but Director Collier and everybody else, Callie and everybody else for their work on this. I'm really excited to continue participating with the consultant coming on board and in the process moving forward. And with the risk of echoing a little bit of my colleagues, I have, I'm an optimistic and hopeful person by nature, but I've lost a little faith in people's ability to, drive and follow the speed limit and things like that. I know we're telling anecdotal stories, but was walking my dogs this past weekend when a car, and I have a tight, narrow street, and a car flew probably 60 miles per hour down my street, almost hit us. We all have stories of that. So what I look forward to, Madam Chairwoman, is really, the signs are good, the paint and all that, and having, police on the corner, which, might help in certain circumstances, but we've also identified other issues. But really looking at the form and build of our streets, right? Whether it's the traffic humps that have been discussed today or otherwise, that creates the environment that physically forces vehicles to slow down. To me, again, I hope that signs and other things would encourage people to slow down. But really, I'm excited to help and to focus in on how we build our streets, what traffic calming measures we put in place that don't give people the option. They have to slow down. So, but again, I just wanted to echo my thanks to everyone. This is a great initiative in the city of Cleveland. This is something I hear about daily, concerns over speeding and things like that. So I look forward to working with the consultant and with everyone else moving forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. And again, I don't see any more hands. Thank you, my colleagues.
I'm sorry, I had my hand up, sorry.
Oh, it didn't show on my screen.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Councilman Brancatelli.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and certainly thank you. This is a robust discussion. I think what some of the questions that got raised earlier is what can be done now. And I think as Callie talked about around the action plan, there's a lot of opportunities here. And I think Ann talked about going out in the community and meeting with residents and what resonates in your ward. And as Director Collier talked about all the different design measures, we're already doing millions of dollars worth of projects. Chief Brown talked about, what's going on policy-wise. With the millions of dollars of projects that we're already doing, we heard loud and clear a few weeks ago when we introduced a repeal and replace for completing green streets. It's around the frustration of not being able to do and not taking residents' input clearly and seriously, which is frustrating. So when we have projects that get on the board and we have community meetings and we have this kind of engagement, and then it's dead silent. And until council members come back and start showing that frustration that what's going on with this and what's happening, we don't get any more feedback after that public meeting. And so that's frustrating. So Vision Zero doesn't mean let's not take a look at what residents are saying and what the input is or what council members are talking about. It means zero input. We had a meeting around Union Avenue with 4 different council members in a public meeting. Lots of talk about bike lanes and protected bike lanes. Lots of talk about businesses and how do we respect businesses and parking. And when asked what the follow-up is basically to be, yeah, you'll see it when it gets designed. There's no more input. And that's the frustrating part. Certainly we heard with Councilman Zone, I think it was Councilman McCormick and others around right-of-ways and access around public housing. And that seems to have gone on deaf ears. So we can talk about Vision Zero, but with the millions of dollars we're spending on projects now, if all we do is have a public meeting just to check a box and then wait until the design comes out, and then we have no more input and we say, wait a minute, this wasn't what residents talked about. How do we put that policy in place when we have a public meeting and say, here's what some of the input is on what residents are looking for, businesses are looking for, and then not have a follow-up? How do we put a follow-up within that? And that's complete, and that's what Completing Green Streets talks about, is having an impact around what follow-up is and who signs off on this, and how do we say this is what's acceptable? And I'm not sure who wants to answer that.
Madam Chair, to the councilman, I'll take a shot at it. Obviously, communication is an important part of any process, if you would. Understanding the concerns around project design, if you would, and initial input. I think what I've heard is that the ability to check a box and come back and before design gets done, that there's a discussion about, well, we heard what the issues and concerns are. We are incorporating that as part of the design and saying, here's what we've come back with before it actually becomes final. I hear that.
Keep operating.
We're always looking at ways to improve the deliverable. So at the end of the day, what we're seeing is, yeah, we're getting more projects out, we'll get more projects done. But if that's a weak point in the process, then we'll do what we need to do to address that issue and that concern.
So when we passed legislation last week around Union Avenue, one of the questions specifically was to bring it back. And it doesn't have to be a public meeting, but it can be to the key stakeholders and the council members. One of the requests was to slow Union down. Union's 35 miles an hour. It doesn't need to be 35 miles an hour. We want to put bike lanes in there. We want to make a connector. The distance between the beginning of Union at Broadway all the way to the end of this design route would add 30 seconds to that travel route, which is 3 miles long. If we took it down to 25. But it would make it much safer. It's a high accident area, and we want to make this a thoroughfare connecting the east. And as Director Collier talked about in terms of equity, that Union Avenue connector is a critical connector for equity in our east side community. So we're hoping that that got heard. The only other answer is hold up legislation until we do have that next public meeting or the next meeting with our stakeholders. That doesn't help at all. So I'm hoping that we can figure out a way to have circle back with the 4 impacted council members and our key stakeholders for a project like that. That's just one example of what's in front of us today when we talk about Vision Zero and how we can have a positive impact on these underserved neighborhoods. Director Collier, I'm not sure if you took off mute if you wanted to comment on that.
No, I just want to make just a few comments with respect to engagement. And for the sake of transparency, I'll just keep it 100 with everyone on the call. One of the things that is very important is, understanding the decision-making process. And we've been doing a lot of work with respect to the design and engineering subcommittee leg of Vision Zero. I'm the co-chair of that along with Rob Mavey. And one of the things that, we're looking at is just internally with respect to the decision-making between when projects are planned and then from the MOCAP perspective, when they're implemented in the fluid process so that we get to outcomes that benefit all involved. Obviously, when we have engagements, and you've been seeing a lot more engagements between planning and the Mayor's Office of Capital Projects and partnering on going out and having community conversation, which is important. A lot of that in many years past did not occur, but that's occurring now. And that these are all steps in the right direction. I think the other component of this, though, is that understanding that when recommendations are made, that those recommendations have to be filtered. So when we do TLCIs, for example, or when we have community engagement processes and there's desires that are expressed by the community, they have to be examined for feasibility, both financial, it gets to capacity, it gets to maintenance, it gets to a whole lot of things. So one of the things that we're trying to do is really crystallize a process that creates that transparency so that people can understand how the process works and what those issues may be that may lead to an outcome that may not be 100% of what the community may want to see. But I understand totally your point with respect to the issue of transparency. I think that's really what you're getting at. And I think that's what we're trying to address through the Vision Zero process is really getting that algorithm so that the public can see these are the filters. We have categories: run, grow, transform, 3 buckets that we're starting to look at projects through. You know, run projects, fixing, making sure things are actually maintained, right? Because you got to make sure the roof ain't leaking on the house. You know, fundamentally, that'll never change. You know, the grow projects where you can do things that are much more aggressive. And then also your transformative projects, which is where you're spending your big money to do things that are transformative. And you have to start to categorize things, particularly when you have, you know, limited resources, when everyone wants, you know, the Bentley for everything, but you got to say, hey, you know, some folks are going to have to get the Honda. We may be able to do the Cadillac here, and we may be able to do the Bentley in certain strategic, you know, locations until funding starts to flow better and we can really start to transform things. So there's a lot to unpack there, and everything that you're saying is, you know, spot on, Councilman Bercatelli, with respect to what needs to be done. And I think that's part of the work, to be quite honest, that we're trying to do, just to make sure that that transparency is there and that that responsiveness is there, and just being honest with the community about what's possible and what's not at a given point.
And I fully agree. And I think, you know, there's no intent, especially with Complete and Green Streets, is to hold the process up. We understand that process has to keep moving on and keep moving forward. But I think there's certainly logical points within that process that people can check in. And likewise, I agree that, you know, residents have recommendations of what they think may make sense. But through traffic engineering, you know, it's not physically able to be done, or it can't financially be done. And so we weigh those balances. But in weighing those balances and coming back and saying, here's why we can do this or why we can't do that. And there's not going to be a winner on every side. Some people may get frustrated because it doesn't get done. And we may hear from folks who have some businesses that are going to say, well, that's going to kill my business and I'm not going to do that. But we can logically say, no, it's not going to do that. It's just going to inconvenience you for that moment. And we saw that when working with the towpath and connecting down on Jennings Road, every business along there said, oh, this is going to be horrible. And you got that turning lane and you're going to take away a lane and put those bike lanes in. It's turned out beautiful. It's an amazing. And for a couple of businesses that did leave for other reasons, their buildings got purchased and acquired and are repurposed. So, you know, this is part of our changing society. We have to make our decisions. And that's what we get paid to do. And that's what we're elected. And I don't mind going back to the community saying we can do this or can't do that. But what is frustrating is when we don't have an opportunity to go back and say, here's where we landed on this. And that's the frustrating part. When we go out to the community and say we're going to be doing things and then they don't get done at all. I know Callie was raising her hand.
Thank you, Council. Thank you. I'll be brief. I just wanted to touch on the speed limit question. Unfortunately, the city of Cleveland doesn't have authority to set speed limits on our streets that's statutorily defined in Ohio Revised Code and governed by ODOT. I think the glimmer of hope here is that actually through the Vision Zero Task Force, there was a conversation convened with our ODOT district about the issue of speed and the statutory speed limits being too high for the urban context and inappropriate. I've also had conversations with Vision Zero initiatives in Columbus and Cincinnati that are really interested in working on this at a statewide level. So all that to say, unfortunately, it's not as easy as we wish it were to reduce speed limits on key streets, but that is something that, as you saw highlighted in the policy section of one of the previous slides, that the Vision Zero task force is working to address.
But there is a policy, there is an opportunity to go back and petition for a speed limit to be changed. And we have that right to do that. So when we say, no, we can't lower the speed limits, and when we're doing a project, we just shrug our shoulders and say, not us. And we can just kick it down the road and say, it's not our problem. We don't take that next step to do that. We get the pushback when we're doing HUD investments, when we're saying, well, you can't spend dollars this way, you can spend dollars that way, and we just shrug. And I think that's part of the question. Why aren't we addressing it to the next level? And if you want to just say, well, it's the state's responsibility, Councilman, if you want to take that initiative, then we'll take the initiative and just go outside of the administration's office and do it. But we have that opportunity to do that. We just choose not to do that.
So I know that in previous streets that this has been discussed, there has been that data collected and that package put together. And those are pieces of the conversation that were taken to ODOT when we met with them. So I think your point is well taken, that there certainly is more that we should continue to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Bishop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I really appreciate task force. I want to say thank you to Matt Zone and Chief Brown and Director Collier, Annie and Collie. You guys are this is really a much needed discussion. As I look at the map, my ward comprises about 3 or 4 the most dangerous intersections on that map. So I am very much concerned about traffic and safety and things going forward that we can do to calm the traffic. We have done some great plans for the future as far as calming traffic and some of our most traveled roadways. But to take a page from Director Collier, to keep it 100, we need enforcement. We need some actions right now. And I want to back up my colleague Councilman Slife and President Kelly. But we need to do things that we can slow this traffic down right away. And my residents don't want to hear about our plans for 2022 and 2023 and all of those great ideas that we have about signs and crosswalks. We need some safety. People want to feel safe in our community right away today. So again, I want to thank the committee and the task force. A great job and great work. But I want to back up my colleagues and say we do need some more aggressive enforcement of our stuff that's already on the books. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Bishop. Okay, I don't think I see anyone else. Again, this is a great presentation. Chief Brown, Director Collier, Callie Mersman, Ann Tilly, of course. Thank you all for all your hard work. And to Councilman Zone, I know this is something very near and dear to his heart. We appreciate all you've done to date. And I guess our next steps will be looking forward to having those conversations about our individual wards and our the data in our wards and our hotspots and looking at going forward with the plan, and once the consultants on board, where we go from here. So again, thank you all for your time and attention this morning. And Joint Health and Human Services and Transportation Committees adjourned.
Thank you.